We did the talk a few months ago on soil, and toward the end of that talk was supposed to be cover crops, but the hour went real fast, and so we didn't get to cover crops, and there was quite a few requests that they wanted to know about the cover crops. So this is sort of a continuation of the soil talk that we began earlier. The reason we're using cover crops in a demo basic garden, we are no longer a production vegetable garden as we were for many years. For various reasons, mostly we're all getting older, and we just cannot put in that degree of work. However, the garden itself is 10, 65-foot rows and a whole bunch of raised beds. So if we cut back the work to just doing mostly trials and experiments and that sort of thing, we're not doing this full production gardening, that means we've got quite a few fallow rows, which means we're going to be out there weeding all the time, and we don't want to weed all the time. So one of our things is, one of my passions in the veggie garden is no more weeding. We want to come out there and enjoy gardening, have a good time, not be sitting on the ground weeding all the time. And pretty much met that goal, fortunately. But we had to learn how to cover these crops, or how to cover the area, so that we just don't have blank fallow rows there. And so just to kind of recap what we talked about with soil is that healthy soil is a dynamic microbial ecosystem. I mean, there are trillions and trillions and trillions of microorganisms in the soil, and they are what makes soil healthy. Without them, we do not have healthy soil. With them, we do have healthy soil. You know, we can put all the compost we want, but it's the microorganisms that eat the compost and turn it into a microbial goo that goes down and coats all the soil particles, the sand, the silt, and particularly the clay, and makes these great porous, highly nutritious aggregates that give life to the soil. And so we need to feed the microbes. We feed them with compost, but mostly we feed microbes with living plants. Every living plant, on average, gives about a quarter of the sugar that they produce through photosynthesis to the microorganisms. Not just the roots. They get about half of it goes to the plant itself. Another quarter goes and is stored in the roots. And another quarter goes out into the soil to the microorganisms. And in return, the microorganisms are processing all the nutrients so that it's in the proper form to be taken up by the plants. So this is the basis of life on this plant. Because if we didn't have that process taking place, everything would be dead. We wouldn't have anything to eat. So to maintain this balance, this is what cover crops are doing. We are always keeping something green, something photosynthesizing, something feeding the microbes, so that the microbes keep living and dying and creating all this goo, which really makes our soil lovely. So what kind of plants are we talking about when we say cover crops? What does that mean? Basically three types: legumes, grains and grasses, and brassicas. We're going to talk about some of these. And there's some that grow in cool season and some that grow in the warm season. So we're going to plant cover. For instance, if a farmer was growing corn, they plant corn during the summer, and then once the corn goes, then they're going to plant a warm season cover crop, at least temporarily. And then when the frost comes, it's going to kill that, and they'll follow that with a cool season cover crop, probably with that's going to pump a lot of nitrogen into the soil just in time for the next corn plant. So you kind of keep it going instead of just having everything fallow. But we'll get into that a little bit later. So here are some of the legumes. Alfalfa, great legume. We'll talk about it more later. Year-round. Crimson clover, just love this stuff. This has turned into one of our favorite ones out in the garden, Sunn Hemp. Beautiful flowers, summer crop, hairy veg, very popular cover crop. It's a legume, but we don't use it out in the garden because it's too coarse when you're trying to get it. Fava beans. Everybody likes falafel. Chickpeas. Falafel combo. These are all winter cover crops. Lab is hyacinth bean. We've grown some hyacinth bean out of the Sonia has it in her flower garden out of the yellow garden. Grasses and grains, the Sorghum-Sudangrass, the millets, lots of different kind of millets, buckwheat. We'll talk about all of these. And brassicas. And the brassicas for cover crops are mostly mustard, different types of mustards, which have a lot of amazing properties, and tillage radish. So we're going to cover this. Are there deer-resistant cover crops? No. And one of the reasons is cover crops are intended to be forage crops. They're highly nutritious. And so many people plant these in order to encourage animals to come in and eat them. And so, you know, game birds, deer, everything, this is the stuff you plant. And also, farmers and ranchers use it for their cows. This is great feed in the winter. And so the cows are still out there eating this stuff and still growing. The cows are pooping. They're doing, you know, this is what's supposed to happen. And so in the agricultural business, a lot of cover crops have to do with feeding animals. So what's the benefits? When you know, we've learned gardening from farmers. You know, there weren't, you know, back thousands of years ago, there weren't a bunch of gardeners that became farmers until they're now. So everything we do is based on farming. And of course, over the ages, farming is basically plowing, tilling, and all that kind of stuff. But if you follow historically what that kind of farming does, which is what we're all used to doing, soil erosion. You can go back through history and find areas that are desolate right now that used to support hundreds of thousands of people. And then over a few centuries, they just sort of went the other way. They disappeared because they over-farmed, they over-tilled, they plowed their fields in the wind and the rain, eroded everything, and they finally, you know, they got to move. I mean, basically, that's what's going on in Honduras right now. There's no farmland anymore. With all of the hurricanes that they've been hit with in the last 10 years, that's all washed out to sea. There's very little farming going on in Honduras anymore. It used to be very fertile, very productive, but it's gone. And you see this through history for thousands of years. The Spartans. We always hear about the Spartans and they're these warriors and all this. The Spartans weren't warriors, they were farmers. And they were into cover crops. And they were into manuring their fields. And they had these wonderful fields. And everybody attacked Sparta because they wanted their fields. And so Sparta had to have armies in order to protect themselves from all these people that wanted that. So it's so what's the benefit? So when farmers use cover crops, they grow these grasses like the Sudangrass that we just looked at. And when they're ready to plant, they just push it over. They have what's called rolling crimpers, these giant rollers that just crimp it down. Various ways they kill it off, but they leave it on the surface. They don't take it off. And when it's left on the surface, it provides a constant mulch layer. It decreases soil erosion, so wind is not going to affect it. Water is going to not run off as much. It's certainly going to suppress the weeds. This is what we really found, is it's an excellent weed suppression. Water infiltration into the soil is much faster. The average non-cover crop field can take about 2 inches of water an hour that will soak in. A cover crop field, after a couple of years, can take 8-10 inches of rain without runoff. It's just incredible how it'll just suck up the water. And a lot of water holding capacity, which gives us drought protection, nutrient capture. Many of these cover crops send their roots incredibly deep and pull out all that leach nitrogen back up into the plant. And so then when you lay it all over into the field and have it as a persistent mulch layer, as it breaks down, it returns that nitrogen to your overall soil layers. So many of these farmers, they don't use much fertilizer anymore. It's all they need from the cover crops. The soil microbiome is really good. Pest and pathogen protection. All of this persistent mulch layer that's on the top is wonderful habitat for spiders and ground beetles and all these that eat pests and pest larvae. So it really comes in handy. Now, why isn't every farmer doing this? Farmers don't make a lot of money. They're really, most of them, small farmers are really on the edge. So they're already paying bank loans for the equipment they have. So if they switch to this method of farming, now they got expensive equipment that they're not going to be using anymore. And they got to buy some other kind of equipment to do this. So many of them are really hesitant to make that leap. You can understand that. So when I talked about the roots going down somewhere here, here's alfalfa going down about 6 feet. This is buffalo grass going down about 7 feet. So we're talking huge root masses of organic material. And one of the things about laying these crops over in the field is that you leave these roots. So they're going to degenerate, they're going to slowly die, but the bacteria is going to live off them as they're doing that, and they're going to still leave all those little channels for the rain to go through. So this is, we were talking about the regenerative agriculture. And so, no plowing, de-disking, tilling, ripping, plant a diversity of crops. So when they plant crops, each cover crop basically does a different thing. Grasses do one thing, brassicas do another thing, legumes do another thing. So it's a combination, but you want diversity. The more diversity you have above the ground, the more diversity you have below the ground. So a lot of them do 2 different types of legumes, a couple of different kinds of grass and grains, maybe a brassica. So that's kind of how you do it. Again, roller crimping, might mow it, might herbicides. Yes.
Are they planting this diversity at the same time, or are they rotating?
Same time. Same time. So they're going to keep the soil covered, keep the living roots in the soil, and keep the dying roots in the soil, and encourage grazing animals. And so we sort of, our whole thing in the veggie garden is, okay, so how do we take what they're doing and put it into a 65-foot row? How are these plants going to behave? We know how they're going to behave out in the fields. How do they behave in the garden? So that's sort of what we're experimenting with. One of the first things we did was alfalfa. There's a type of Alfalfa Bulldog 805 that is particularly bred for warmer climates. And we tend to plant it in the fall, perennial year round. It is an insectary for like a nursery of beneficial bugs. Lots of beneficial bugs. I mean, it is lacewings everywhere, ladybugs everywhere, just lots of activity going on in there. And a very, very deep root filtration. It's a legume, so it's going to add back that nitrogen to your soil. So here's one of the beds that we put in. Here's the same bed. And we just cut it back about every 3 weeks or so. We just take that, cut it back. You can compost the alfalfa. It does real well. Cowpeas. Everybody likes cowpeas. Southern peas. We've been planting that for a few years out there. Excellent warm season legume. The hotter it is, the more they like it. They keep tolerating a bit of shade. They fix nitrogen. Any weeds that grow underneath them are just wimpy little things trying to get to the light because they just don't grow well at all. Great nectar plant for paper wasps. I'll talk about that in a second. Unfortunately, it's very nutritious for the rats. So you got to keep them critter fencing around them. You got to keep the rat boxes out. Rats like it just as much as we do. These are some of the varieties we've had out there. Zipper cream peas every year is the winner. It's a delicious pea. It produces constantly. And I think we still have some in the refrigerator. But and so here was our Judy did the trial with 3 rows of various kinds of greens. Some Sorghum-Sudangrass here. Here's his spraying copper. They tend to get a little rusty now and then. So other people like a little copper spray. But very easy to grow, very so it's paper wasp. They didn't go for the flowers, they went for the spot right at the base of the bean. We don't know why. But they don't like wasps. And nobody got stung, by the way. There were wasps everywhere in those things. They were just one. But of all everybody out there harvesting, nobody ever got stung. Because they're, away from the nest, paper wasps were pretty docile. But they're nice to have around because they eat these things. So they feed the worms to their offspring. Sunn Hemp. This is one of our favorites out there. It's just a beautiful plant. It's a legume. It fixes nitrogen like crazy. It will get 7, 8, 9 feet tall if you leave it alone. But it's a beautiful subtropical plant. They've been using it in India for millennia. That's why they call it Sunn Hemp. In India, anything that can be used for growth is called hemp. And so, lots of biomass. And so what so here it is coming up on row 9. And then rabbits, this is forage. We have a lot of problems with rabbits out there eating stuff. And so we did a whole planting and the rabbits ate everything. And so then we went back and Judy and Alice and I did another planting and we decided we're just going to plant a whole bunch. And it's just be too much for the rabbits to eat. All of a sudden, they disappeared. And all came out. This is why we had a massive hedge of Sunn Hemp. But it was a beautiful plant. So, like I said, this is the first time we used it, so we were kind of experimenting. We cut this one back. We didn't cut this back here, so this kept going. But we would, cut it at various lengths. Here's one cut way down now. Notice how low this is. We put that one down low to see how it would grow. This one we have about 4 different levels, and we're just cutting it with a hedge trimmer just to see what happens. But the neat thing is, just keeping this cut back with a hedge trimmer, it's have a beautiful little hedge going on there. And so my rule of thumb for most of this, particularly with Sunn Hemp, is when it gets to waist high, you cut it to knee high. When it gets to shoulder high, cut it to waist high, and just kind of just keep it there unless you want it taller. And the nice thing about it taller is that it makes this beautiful. Now look at this. So here's that I cut down real low. Look at it there. I mean, it caught up pretty fast. Those are fast growers. And the more you cut this stuff back, the more roots they put out, and the deeper the roots go. So cutting it back is a good thing. So it's a beautiful hedge. We put some in at home. We're trying to redo this one bed where we hate the soil. We're just putting as much cover crop in as we can. So we've got the alfalfa and Sunn Hemp growing there. It's just a beautiful little hedge. It's going to die anyway. Well, the wind we had last week and the rain might fall. But anyway, that's our Sunn Hemp. And it does not produce seed. It must be in a subtropical region for the flowers to produce seed. So it'll go to flower here, but it will not produce seed. So no flowers.
Is it annual or perennial?
Annual. Warm season annual. Once it gets cool, it dies. And here's some dead from it.
So would you just cut those off at the ground line?
So exactly. So we cut them off here. Actually, they just kind of brought it away right at the base of the stem. And then we used we used this one we just put it down as mulch. So we now have a nice little rough mulch layer there.
Or it will not go back again the next year.
No, it's not a print. You have to reseed everything. Buckwheat. Spring to fall, it can't take the frost. You plant it thick and it's a green mulch that there's just weeds just give up. They just won't grow with it. You can cut it back 2 or 3 times. It goes to seed in about 6 weeks. And it will come back from seed. So you can kind of if you let it go to seed, it'll get a little weedy on you. But the good thing is, the little ones when they come back, they're just pull them out in like half a second. It's not a problem weed. It's not like a weed you have to dig out. If it reseeds, it comes back. If you just pluck them out, there's nothing to it. So it's really not a problem. A dense fibrous root system in the top few inches of soil. Mycorrhizal love this stuff. So you will end up with this wonderful mycorrhizal network that is developed with your buckwheat. So if you've had buckwheat there, and don't pull it out. I mean, what do we do as gardeners? We pull the plant out, we shake the good dirt off, and all those roots that are filled with trillions of beneficial bacteria and fungi, we throw away. Cut it off at the root, cut it off at the soil level, leave the roots, and we will leave all that beneficial stuff down there. Also, buckwheat is known to be a great nectar source for the tiny beneficial flies and wasps that go after all our pests. So if you got a lot of buckwheat planted, you just stand there for a while, and all of a sudden you begin to see tiny wasp and flies doing the thing. Here's the root system of buckwheat. It doesn't go down 7 feet like the alfalfa does, but it penetrates. And again, it's this huge mycorrhizal network. So picture if we just cut it off at the root level, left all this, so you got that massive mycorrhizal network. You plant whatever you're going to plant afterwards, your vegetable, and as soon as those roots get down there, they're into that network. So that's the benefit of leaving our roots. Right? So this was probably about 2 weeks Probably sooner than that, 10 days of planting. And there we go. Beautiful flower. Side angle. So that's our buckwheat. So you can plant it, and the nice thing is it's short, 6 weeks. So if you've got something space in your garden, it's not going to be there long. You just throw down some buckwheat, up it comes, and just, get rid of it in 6 weeks and follow with that. But if you want to leave it in there longer, again, we can cut it back 2 to 3 times. After the 3rd time you cut back, it's not going to sprout out quite as well. Millets, lots of different kinds of millets. As far as its benefit as a cover crop, is not much difference between these. The main difference is forage. So if you're looking for a certain type of birds or grazing animals, you would use different types. It's a warm season grass. We're going to use it in the summer, 3 to 5 feet tall. Again, it's a grass. You cut it back, it comes back. Cut it back, it comes back. So you just keep generating more and more biomass, more and more mulch. So as we cut this stuff back, whether it's the Sorghum-Sudangrass, whether it's the millet, whether it's the Sunn Hemp, we just take all that, we lay it down the road, and you've got that road covered. They lay it down in the road that we cut it back, cut it from, we may lay it down in a different road. It doesn't matter, but it's going to go back into the soil. So here's our pearl millet. And it grows. So here it was at that height. It's tall. We do have to, there's some little seed heads here. We do pull the seed heads off of it so we don't get in trouble with that. But it's not hard, but it's just kind of a pain, sort of like weed. But the neat thing Alice discovered that if you just, we weren't cutting them, Alice discovered if you just grab and pull it, comes right out, just pops out. So that was a real time saver. Sorghum-Sudangrass looks pretty much the same, but again, a warm season, very fast growing grass. You can cut it many times, and again, it's going to generate more and more biomass, more and more mulch. The roots will penetrate compacted soils. As we cut it back, the root mass increases dramatically. So all that is getting them real deep. It produces this sort of root exudate. It suppresses nutsedge and other weeds. And we know, and if anybody remembers the old days in the demo garden, between rows 1, 2, and 3, there was a forest of nutsedge. And everybody can tell horror stories of digging nuts, and big group of us digging that up and trying to get rid of that nutsedge. And it just never, it's always get back. This summer we planted this, the nutsedge didn't come back. It was just gone. And now there'll be a couple little ones come out here and there, but it pretty much eliminated the nutsedge. So here's Sorghum-Sudangrass. And we were at the Sweet Eats, the little farm, out there on 29 near 95 this week with the training class. And he's got a corn maze, and he's saying most of the places that have these corn mazes, they don't use corn anymore. They're using Sorghum-Sudangrass because it's just so easy and it's so cheap that corn can be a problem, but this just grows. So he interspaces his. Now, getting it down was a little bit of a challenge. We had to go to Home Depot and rent a chainsaw because after these, I mean, you have the root, and then of course it's a grass, so it puts on tillers all the side. I mean, some of them are this. It was huge. So we chainsawed it down. So we're going to rethink that a little bit. Tillage radish, it's a type of dicot radish. It mines the nitrogen deep in your soil. Now, this isn't the tillage radish, this is a root of wheat, but it's pictures the kind of same sort of principle. Where so think of the nitrogen is we want it in like the top 12 inches of soil, but it's going to nitrogen moves with water, so it's going to leach out, and it goes to deeper levels where most plants cannot access it. However, the tillage radish is going to access all this deep nitrogen, pull it back up into its body. And so not only are you getting a nitrogen-rich tuber, you're also what's they're calling biodrilling. And some varieties of radishes can be 6 feet long. And they will just basically drill down into compacted soils. This is great for a lot of aggregate and agriculture because some of those machines they use compact their soil. So they can biodrill using these very, very long tillage radishes. And you leave them in, you don't harvest it. The animals will eat this. You can kill it off in various ways, but you leave this in the ground to degenerate, and it will release its nitrogen back into the top 12 inches of your soil. So it mined it up and released it back, and also broke up any compaction in the soil. However, somebody mentioned to me the other day that they were reading that if you plant it too thickly, when they start degenerating, it smells like dirty diapers. Somebody, we just planted some thickly in one of the raised beds out of the garden. So we'll see. That's how there's a big planting of it. Cereal rye. Bunch of different types of cereal rye. The most common one we use here is the Elbon rye. We're going to use Ryman rye this year because we can't find Elbon. I don't know if it's a pandemic thing or what, but most of the places where we get our seed doesn't have the Elbon this year. There's about 13 more. And the cereal rye is used everywhere throughout the nation. So some grow better in cold climates, some do better in warm climates. The Elbon tends to do better in warm climates than the rye supposedly. It is not the same as ryegrass. So this is not annual ryegrass. This is cereal rye. It's more related to wheat and barley than the grass is, the ryegrass is. Cool season. So we've just planted some. It can grow to 3 to 6 feet tall. And they like it in agriculture because it is inexpensive. Takes up soil nitrogen, holds it well until the next planting. Suppresses weeds, all that kind of things. There's some feeling that it may harbor some cutworms that winter over in that grass. But so do lady beetles. And here's our Elbon rye, planted on row 8. Here's our Sunn Hemp over here. Here was our millet, which we cut and laid down. Here it is, we're preparing a bed for potatoes. And here are our potatoes, and here is our, remember it said the Elbon rye can get up to 6 feet? Pretty tall, here it is. Now, we had an interesting phenomenon this year. Not long after the freeze. The potatoes were planted about a week or 2 before the freeze. They made it through it. And shortly after the freeze, they started coming out. And when they were about half this high, almost this high, we were inundated with ladybugs. I mean, thousands of ladybugs. they overwintered in this grass. And they were out and they were ready to lay eggs, and they were laying eggs, and we had ladybug larvae everywhere, we had ladybugs everywhere. There wasn't anything for them to eat. And so we were scratching our heads, and what are they eating? We can't figure this out. And so finally we kept observing, and we realized they were cannibalizing each other. But even, you know, how you get the egg, and then you get the little alligator larva, and then it goes into the pupal stage, which sits on a leaf. Well, the pupal stage, they were done for, because those larvae were right on, so they were eating all the pupa. So it was interesting situation. Anyway, so beneficial bugs will overwinter. Here it is, where we cut it down. Just cut it with a hedge trim. Crimson clover. Oh, 11 months of clover. It's a cool season annual. Nitrogen fixing like crazy. Will reseed itself. So if you let it go to seed, or you let it flower and you don't get rid of it before it goes to seed, you're going to have it in the same spot. Which for a lot of farmers, that's what they want. So, you know, they spend money on crimson clover 1 year, and that's the last they have to spend on that, because it's going to come back every year. Planted in the fall, grows thickly, it cuts the best of weeds. Spring is really when the nitrogen fixation gets going. Some reports that it can support root knot nematodes. So it might not be something you want to plant where you have nematode problems. The cereal rye, by the way, I didn't mention this, the cereal rye will kill root knot or control root knot nematodes. The nematodes are attracted to the roots, and they will get into the root. But once they get into the root system, they get trapped and die. Again, crimson clover supports your beneficial insects, which is really good in the winter because the beneficial insects don't have a lot of nectar that they can go to, and so having this is a good thing. So here's our garden. Here's our Sorghum-Sudangrass, our Sunn Hemp, our Millet. Still has some peas going on here. Pretty much a garden of cover crops. The ones we used in the demo garden are the Sorghum-Sudangrass, like I showed you, the millet, the legumes, the spring, the winter, the yellow on cereal rye, clover. This year, we're experimenting with 7 different types of cool season cover crops. So we've taken the raised bed area because nobody's growing anything in the raised bed these days. Most of our gardeners, issues with the pandemic prevented them from coming out. So we've taken just about each raised bed and we're putting a different type of winter cover crop. Tillage radish, a couple of mustards, crimson clover, chickpeas, Austrian winter peas, various ones. And they're coming up, by the way. Yeah, these are and so we're going to see how they behave. And the reason we're planting them individually instead of together is so that we can see how they grow. This fall, we don't know. We don't know how to manage them. So we don't want to just kind of throw them all out into the garden with not understanding how we can do. And so, stop by the garden and take a look at it. They have a work in progress, the learning curve. So we'll see. But Jeannie, who was just out there before she came here today, and said that about half the stuff was up already. That's fast. We just planted it Saturday. Oh, there we go. So here's all the, everything that we planted. So we'll report back on. Planting through millet mulch. So this is one of the things that so what the farmers do is they'll lay this stuff down in the field, they'll turn it over, let it, kind of degenerate, and then use generally what's called a drilled seeder. It's a type of seeder that instead of just, most seeding, it makes a little furrow, the seeder drops a seed in, and then there's something behind that that brings the furrow back together. Well, you can't do that if it's covered in all this large chunks of mulch. So they have what's called a drill seeder, which just pokes through the soil, puts the seed in, and whatever it wants. So we thought, well, what if we transplant through this stuff? What's going to happen? So when we cut this down, Dale and I cut down the millet, and there it is. And so we just opened up a little area, improved the soil, threw in some compost and fertilizer and such, and stuck a transplant in. And there they all are. Some peppers and some eggplant. I had a video. I think I gotta do it again.
At the bottom of it, there's a little play button,
Okay.
bottom of your picture.
Man, forget it. Anyway, it was just me walking down the aisle. Oh,
There it goes.
And they've grown very well. We did jalapenos and serranos and one mystery pepper that looks sort of like a cayenne, and some eggplant. Had a little problem with the eggplant, but the peppers are still going. Still going strong. And so we've got this, this mulch that, all these beneficials out there. Anytime you fool around, you see all those spiders go everywhere. It's just amazing how many spiders we got. With the armyworms. Have you ever, one of the ways to look for armyworms is you fill a 5-gallon bucket with water and some dish soap and go out and dump it where you think the armyworms are and then watch them come up. So we did that in the garden and we saw some armyworms. What you really see are all the tiny little spiders. And it's just amazing how many tiny little spiders we have everywhere. And so, anytime we're filled with this, you're always seeing tiny spiders, big spiders, and they're taking care of stuff for you. And one of the biggest problems over the years that we've had in the garden is with the cucumber beets. Just everywhere. This year we just had almost. You see a few here or there, but it's just not a big deal. Just don't have that any problems. And I have to think it's having the spiders and the ground beetles that are taking care of the cucumber beetle larva that's right there in the soil. Same thing so we did the red potatoes. So we're ready. I think we've planted. We covered the red potatoes and the potatoes with Sorghum-Sudangrass mulch and some straw. And they just did good. They loved it. So it's chunky, it's heavy, but it works. It's good. What about at home? So here's this little circle we made at home. We have a hard time keeping things growing in it. We did have a mountain laurel that was doing okay until the trees. So I thought, well, let's just throw some Sudangrass in there and see what happens. To try to get to this clay, to try to break some of that clay up and get that going. So we'll see what happens. This is in the shade, so it's not growing real well. Here's some millet growing along the back fence. And I have this area between one fence and a garden bed. This is a railroad tie. And weeds are always growing in here. This is the real thing. So what I'm doing is cutting the millet and just throwing it in there. And so we can just keep, so if you have an area similar to that, you just want to, nothing is ever going to be planted there. Nothing's going to grow there except weeds. And you got to go in there every 2 months and dig everything out. Just fill it in. And alfalfa. There's some alfalfa with sage. That's a beautiful little plant. Attracts a lot of beneficial. So we can use cover crops when we're not using a bed. It pumps carbon-rich sugars into the soil, so it keeps all the microbes happy. It keeps them there. They don't have to, after you know, if we let it fallow, then, you know, when we're ready to plant it, you know, we'll dig some more compost in, put some fertilizer in, and we'll put our plant in. And over time, the population is going to come up and everything's going to be fine. But if we had cover crop there that was pumping nitrogen in already, that was pumping sugars into the microbes, they're ready to go from day one. There's no lag time. So, get going. Keep the mycorrhizal fungi alive and active, producing glomalin. Glomalin has helped with the aggregate formation in your soil. And you know, earthworms love it. They've got all those bacteria. These are some of the resources. One of my favorite is the SAR program, which is a huge agricultural research program. Many different universities and A&M also, but I think many research universities feed in to the SARS program and get their funding from it. So it's just a wealth of information. Rodale Institute does quite a bit on it from the standpoint of gardening, large gardens, those days. So this, the SARS is mostly certainly agricultural. This tends to be more gardening, organic gardening oriented. Green cover seed, a lot of good educational stuff. We tend to purchase most of our seed for the demo garden from Hancock Seed and from Haas School. I have a real good selection. Johnny Seeds, always good. And again, the educational is truly market. I haven't purchased anything from them, but they have lots of educational material. Really good. Those are all. Any questions? Yes, please.
So would you need to change your cover crops, so you know, like certain, when you go back, ordinary probably would want to do that with the grass. Planting.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, well,
Summarize it.
so your question, let me see if I get it right. Yeah. Oh, I say the same type. No, I haven't seen that because the most common thing in agriculture to plant before corn is the Sorghum-Sudangrass. So that's what they tend to follow it with. However, a lot of the corn farmers do plant the Sunn Hemp. So they're doing a legume that's going to increase nitrogen in the soil, so that corn. So probably, but that's why they stress diversity. Do a grass, do a legume, do a brassica, so that it's not just one type of farming. There's always something going on.
Has anybody ever thought about using a mixture of these cover crops, say in a section where you want to grow a garden next year, and there's just turf grass in there, just chuck them out there and let them grow, and maybe kill off what's below it, kind of eliminate the solar rising and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
The question, I'm going to repeat it for the Zoom people. Can you take an area that you want to become a garden that is in pretty bad shape and put some cover crop in there to help it out so that you're kind of ahead of the game when you're ready to treat the soil? Yes, you can do that. So you can put like the tillage radish to get that down, to get the compaction down, putting in some legume for put the nitrogen in there. The grass is going to give you a lot of root biomass that's going to get in there. And of course, once these roots start establishing themselves, the water, every time it rains, the water is going to soak in much better and improve all that.
What if that would kill off the turf grass for you?
Probably kill off turf grass. But we're actually doing that in the demo garden. We lost our pomegranates. Yeah, we lost our pomegranates during the freeze. So we took all the roots out and we just removed some grass and put in compost and newspaper and compost. And what we're going to do is put in tillage radish, do exactly that. Tillage radish, some grass, and legume, and see what happens next. It's good.
What do you recommend for raised bed garden? I've only got maybe.
If you, what we've had good success in raised beds so far is alfalfa. And if that is going to go down 6 feet, at least 5, 6 feet, keep it cut back so that it increases the roots. And alfalfa works real good. Alfalfa is a print, so at some point you have to cut it. Innovative plant because it'll control your weeds, but also control anything else you try to plant with it. So far, my experience with alfalfa is it just the alfalfa. Other things don't grow well with it.
What did you use to kill the alfalfa back when you were done with it?
Rabbit. And that's what's used agriculturally when you terminate a field. That's what they call it. When you have cover crop growing that you have to get rid of, that you can't just roll over and trim. I mean, you can, the big tall grasses, you can roll over and trim those things. But some of the stuff, particularly the cool season cover crop, is a lot lower growing. And if you roll over it, it's just going to keep on growing anyway. And so they terminate it with the process.
What if you're ever is juncea-grass?
Good luck with that.
So, as normally, because right now, I haven't had a chance, so it's everywhere. Should I just cut it off, or should I leave the roots in, or should I just?
No, I don't think so. Kate, what do you think? I don't know what's that juncea-grass.
Yeah, cut it off and get rid of the seed head right now, because you don't want it to, it's not a good plant.
No, this is.
So,
couldn't only do.
Yeah, yeah, you don't want it to come back, so,
I was hoping I could just cut it off with a weed or. Normally I spend days and days pulling it all out.
right, it'll come back,
I know it's always coming.
yeah,
That's-
yeah. I would,
I was hoping it was helping my soul.
No. Anything else? Thank you.